But of course, a lot of that was shuttered. But we love this apartment. It's an old 1920s apartment. I'm here with my partner, Terenzia, and it was the first time we'd moved in together, so it was a bit of a test, which we flying colours, I'm pleased to say. And we actually had quite a splendid time here. In splendid isolation, you would say.
I've always compared being in a band to being in a relationship and moving in with them, and that it's like the best way to test out the bonds of a relationship. And, being in a band and touring in a van is a very good way of sort of testing the outer limits of your friendship and relationship with other people.
You can say that again.
It strikes me that you've been particularly lucky on that front in that, you've had people that you've collaborated with so long. You must get along reasonably well with them.
Well, of course. Yeah. Absence, is a fine thing as well. We're not together all the time. I mean, I'm personally off doing all sorts of projects with a lot of different contributors, so it makes it stimulating. And then when you come back, it's refreshing. Same thing in a relationship outside of a band. It's a healthy thing to have a bit of distance.
Do you feel like taking on a lot of different things in various mediums keeps you sane?
In a way, yeah, it keeps you stimulated anyway. I mean, I'm compulsively driven towards collaboration. I love it. I get a lot from it, and hopefully I give back.
The timing seems very deliberate that you have this new album and this new book of poetry coming out at the same time. And poetry traditionally you like painting, which I think you do as well, is a very solitary act, but you found a way to actually make this collaborative.
Well, it's collaborative as far as the album goes, because it's spoken word with music, yes. And I was very fortunate to just by sheer serendipity run across this group called Rakia, LA-based band. I was actually going to a concert to see a friend of mine play in downtown LA, and she was on before them. I didn't intend to stay after, but this band started setting up. I still had a drink to finish, so I thought, well, I'll see what they're like and check out a song maybe. And as soon as they started playing, I was riveted because they were so exceptionally good. All instrumental music, and it's a trio: guitar, keyboards, and violin. And at the time, I had it on a sort of back burner in my mind to possibly do some spoken word with music. And I wasn't sure whether I would be layering all the instruments, which I've done in the past, or if I'd be bringing in other players. As soon as I heard this band play, I thought, this could really work with these poems. And so I approached the group afterwards, and they were up for it. So we're in the studio a few days later, and we recorded the track, The Mother Tree, in one take. And
it's a funny thing about creative projects that a lot of times you're thinking about them for years or decades, and when they actually come together, they just come together so quickly if you're lucky.
Yeah. And if you're open to different ways in which those ideas can become manifest, not to you don't impose restrictions on the way that the session is going to go. And that was certainly the case with these sessions. It was very open, and I encouraged the band to bring as much of themselves to it as they could, and I just presented them with the poems and gave them carte blanche really to come up with some music. And they listened they'd read, which is another way of listening. They'd read with attention, and what they brought to the session was just perfect. no. And I didn't want to hear too much of it when we went in to record. I just got them to play me a little sample of what they come up with, and then if necessary, I'd like offer some ideas about how it could be tweaked, although that was really minimal. And I never heard these pieces until we were actually recording, and we did it spontaneously, so that I would be doing the vocal at the same time that they were doing the music. It wasn't like they were laying down the music, then I would go in and do the vocal. So we were responding to each other. It's very responsive, and I think you really get that feeling from listening to it. You know, I'm listening to them, they're listening to me.
You know, it's obvious to me how improvised music is responding in the moment. But as somebody reading a poem that I'm guessing in a lot of cases were written a long time ago, how does your energy change, and how do you actually react to that music, and how does it how does the music actually affect your reading?
Oh, it affects it very much. I mean, it sort of brings the whole thing to life for me. It brought those poems to life, the music that they were playing, and I haven't got I haven't got a fixed way of reading these pieces. I'm just going with the flow of it, just really feeling it, feeling the spaces, and responding to what they are playing. So it's very alive in the moment of the recording. It's not rigid at all.
I don't know how many of these you actually did in one take, but doing it live was an essential part to creating what you wanted to create.
Yeah, they were all either first or second take. The 5 tracks.
That's wild. Have you ever recorded a piece of music that was like that spontaneous?
Yeah, many times.
Okay, so but you generally, I assume, were like playing it as part of that process as well.
Yeah, and that has been the case in the past as well. You know, in other collaborative projects, solo, and with both bands, with Bauhaus and Love Rockets, there was always that element to what we did. It's an exciting way to work
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you why that's remained an important aspect of your process.
because it's exciting. And also, it's away from. I mean, there are other tracks that are very, very much worked out, and they're crafted. They have a format. You know, there's a rigidity to them. Although there's always room for expression outside of that format. But there are those tracks. I mean, usually that is the case with tracks. They're pretty much worked out. So it's a joy to go outside of that, like paint outside of the lines, if you will. And sometimes it can be a combination of the two, you know. But I think it's an important element to have that unpredictable facet.
It strikes me that's a good way to avoid overthinking something.
Sure, yeah, and it's just even being open to mistakes, accidents, unpredictable incidents, you know, tuning, I'm very attuned to that kind of thing. And that can really be the magic, you know, that really brings a piece of music to life.
I mean, it sounds like this is a very tight group of musicians you were working with, but did some of those accidents still make it onto the record?
Yeah, here and there. There are what could be called mistakes, but I don't see them as mistakes. They're just incidents that happen in the moment, and it's not what you planned, but it can often be better than what was planned. You know, it's all about keeping the music alive.
I liked what you said earlier about being open to new experiences. And obviously, the cliche is, and I think this is probably the case with a lot of people, as you get older, you tend to close yourself off to new experiences. Do you find that that's been the case for you, or are you more open now than ever? Yeah.
And what allows that to happen more now is that I have a lot more confidence in what I do, and that really opens you up, you know. So the older I get, I find the more cavalier I become.
Was that an issue? Was a lack of confidence an issue for you early on?
Well, just the sort of insecurity, especially when I embarked on a solo career in 1983. You know, I'd only previously, prior to that, I'd only played in bands. So when it's just me up there solo on a stage, it was rather terrifying, you know. But within that terror, there's a spark of sort of Luciferian um, uh, inspiration, and I became aware of that the first time I played in that capacity, and I seized on it. I could see that there was a spark there that was it was both terrifying but also wildly exciting, and that's still there to a degree.
How would you describe Luciferian inspiration?
It's been on the edge, and it's a light that burns very brightly on the razor's edge, and it can burn or it can illuminate. It can do both at the same time, and there's a kind of divine madness inherent in that space.
Maybe I'm going to go out on a limb here, but it strikes me that maybe there's a parallel to that and some of the subject matter in this book of poems, in that a lot of the people that you're writing about in here, a lot of people that influenced it, are people who like lived fast and died young.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and who lived on that edge, who embraced that edge, and that quality has always really spoken to me. And though all those pieces are in the threnody part of the book, and their elegies and their tributes, you know, to those who have died.
You've been around for some time. You seem reasonably healthy from what I can tell. Have there been points in your life where you felt that you really were living on the edge?
Oh yeah, too numerous to mention. Yeah, I find it very attractive. You know, I am that moth that goes towards the extinguishing flame. Um, it's, yeah, I'm very drawn to that.
What does that mean for you? Like, what form has that taken in your life and your art?
It's it can be in the studio, and it can be on stage, and it's something that I'm attuned to. Just I relish it when things go awry, and it goes. You know, the plan is suddenly abandoned, and you're out teetering on this very precipitous edge, and it's about a matter of like taking a leap in the dark and having faith that something will keep you airborne. And that really is the essence to me. That's the essence of what I seek in creativity.
There must be times though where it doesn't keep you airborne, and when disaster comes from living on the edge.
That's part of the game. Yeah, that's you have to accept that. But more often than not, you do find that you have wings. I mean, that was a big part of Bauhaus. You know, it was really on the edge. We never knew, especially with someone like Peter Murphy at the front. We never knew what was going to happen next, and it could be genuinely extremely dangerous to ourselves, the audience, and whoever, you know, was in the vicinity at the time. but he's wildly exciting as well.
How did Peter Murphy, for you, how did Peter Murphy specifically manifest that lifestyle?
Through his wild unpredictability. He's essentially mercurial. And you just don't know which way the wind's going to blow. And it could be a gale force hurricane. And it could be, full of flying debris. So you have to be ready to duck, dive, and weave, and catch flying objects, and maybe attempt to juggle with them.
You obviously have, continued to have a relationship with him. Has he, to a certain extent, has he mellowed out? I feel like you have to mellow out,
No.
or else, no? Okay.
No, not at all.
Specifically, when you got back together with him, and I believe you were touring with him as recently as 2022. Did that feeling just return to you kind of immediately?
Oh yes, it did. But I mean, on that tour, it really did. The moths did fly completely into the flame, and were the blaze was glorious on one hand, but also it was fatal.
Yeah, you said you relish when things go awry, and it strikes me that maybe there is something aesthetically pleasing in that, but it's the cleanup that's really the hard part.
Yeah, and sometimes the cleanup is not possible. There's just debris on the ground and smoking ruins.
I assume that I consider myself to be like generally an introverted person in life, but I'm still somebody who can get out on a stage, and talk to people. And a lot of it is, even though I've done it a lot, that adrenaline rush is still there. But, in terms of walking on a razor's edge, I mean, there's no better place to do that in front of, hundreds or thousands of people.
Yeah. Although I feel that it's in a way more terrifying to go out there in front of just a handful. You feel more exposed. There's a strange kind of contradictory anonymity in being on stage in front of a vast audience. You can somehow retreat. I find personally I can retreat into a space that feels, in a way, protected. I just feel like it's more exposure. The smaller the stage, I mean, just playing in a living room, that is more, feels more precarious than playing in an arena.
Yeah, you can hear everything that's said, every sigh in the audience, every reaction.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. Although I've for many years now, I've literally played in living rooms, and I do love doing those shows, and I do love the intimacy of it and the connectedness of it. And I love meeting the members of the audience that are there and talking with them afterwards, and it being away from the impersonal big shows, so there is that. Yeah. But it's just a moment, like the initial moment of walking out into a living room in front of people like that. You feel very exposed. It's like standing up at a wedding and making a speech. I don't know. This whole wedding.
But it's even more than that. There's the added awkwardness of being in a stranger's house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's obviously a very personal space to them. So there's an inherent tension in that. And especially with strangers coming in, the other audience members coming into that space. But my experience of those gigs is that everybody's so respectful, and it's a lovely vibe.
But everybody who goes to one of those shows wants to be there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they feel like it's a real special occasion, you know? And because there's only like 20 or 30 people there, they feel special.
When did you start DJing?
That was in the late 90s. And I got a residency at the Viper Room and for a month. And I loved it, you know, and it went well. At that time, Tenacious D were just starting, and they would come in and just sort of raise merry hell in their jag black, leaping from table to table and somersaulting across the stage. And so they were like they were like the house act, and they were on when I was on. So that was very entertaining. It was a good time to be doing the Viper Room.
That's really funny because you mentioned the Viper Room in the 90s, and I was thinking, oh, it's going to be raucous, but for different reasons. You know, obviously there's a reputation that it had during that time period.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Which, you know, is not exaggerated. But I would just go in and do my set and have a little drink and then go. You know?
In terms of that relationship you have with the audience, and you know, the Viper Room, it's not a living room, but it's certainly smaller than a stadium. How does that change, if at all, when you're DJing and you're, you know, effectively playing someone else's music in front of a crowd of people?
How does it change? Well, it's a lot easier. You know, I'm not exposing myself, as it were, and I'm sharing music, you know, and I love doing that. It's like one of my favorite things to do. And I do really love it if particularly if a young person comes up, they haven't heard the track I just played and they're blown away by it and they want to know what it is. So I'll hold up the sleeve, you know, and they can write down what it is and I'll put it in their phone. And they can put it in their phone and get it, you know. And I love that, the generative process of that, you know.
At least in the early days when you started doing that, do you think that people were coming to those shows with a very, like, a specific idea of the kind of music you were going to play based on the bands you've been in?
Yeah, sure. You know, particular venues were like that as well. If I was playing more of a goth gig, you know, that would certainly be the case. And I would do my level best to really go against the grain. And
To annoy people?
No, just to try and open up their minds. I was playing music that I loved, you know. I'd be playing like drum and bass, you know, when that was happening, like Goldie, things like that, or trip hop, you know, tricky. And they would either get it or they wouldn't. Some would complain, you know, very pointedly. Some would climb up if I was up on them, I sometimes would be in like a crow's nest. I get these little goth kids climbing up, complaining, you know, and I just kind of swat them away. Or I'd say, no, listen to this, listen to it. You know? And sometimes I'd get them coming over and saying, oh, this is not what they usually play here, but I really like it. I have no idea what it is. What is it? And I'll tell them, and that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. In the days before Shazam, especially.
I like to challenge those kind of audiences.
I'm guessing you don't get this as much because everybody has Shazam on their phone and can figure out themselves. But there's a wonderful conversation that you can have with somebody who you never met before if they come up to you and ask you what kind of music you're playing.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, this all goes back to sharing tapes with my mates, you know, and that's a conversation, and it's a delightful one. I had an ongoing exchange with Pat Fish, the jazz butcher, for years and years. Something I really miss now that he's left us. I've still got many cassette tapes that he sent me, quite a few of them with little cartoons, drawings, and notes. You know, and he was a great was a mentor to me as far as music, because he was really, really ahead, always ahead of what was happening. And he turned me on to so many things. Like, I think off the top of my head, Big Star was one that I got via Pat. Happy Mondays, really early, when they just had a little cassette, you know. Yeah, and Pat's taste was very eclectic. I mean, he was into things like hip hop, which you probably wouldn't glean from listening to his own music. But also, we had a shared love of the pool of the Velvet Underground. When I say the pool, I mean like everything that came from that group.
Well, you have Edie Sedgwick behind you.
Yes, Edie. Yes. Oh, of course, lived on the edge, right in the house.
It's such a corny thing to say, but I was looking at your Instagram before the conversation, and there was I think you and your partner took a trip to Cuba, and you had a pit stop in Miami, and you were playing dub music. And as I look back on your career and your influences, dub, reggae, ska, those are things that have always in some form been there, it seems.
Yeah, yeah. Reggae was really the first music that I fell in love with as a genre. That was really early, like when I was 13, 1970. And I would sneak into the skinhead disco, and what they would play exclusively there was reggae. And reggae that you could only hear in a club like that, because it wasn't even for sale. And it was the first time I heard instrumental tracks that came over directly from Jamaica. And a little bit later on, I'd go to these sound systems, and they would have records like that, and they'd have guys toasting, what they call toasting, where they're kind of like rapping over the top. And that was really exciting. So yeah, that's always been a core element to the music that I love. And yeah, it was great doing that little gig in Miami. They don't see, when I'm out on the decks, they don't always have all the effects, but sometimes you do get those. And I love like getting stuck into all that, putting on the echoes and the phasers and messing around with the EQ. It's a joy to do that.
Watching the video, it appears to be in a record store. Is
Yeah.
that right? Yeah, which is kind of the ultimate version of, it's not quite a living room, but this is the place where you go to talk to people, to nerd out about music.
Yeah. And it was we did a meet and greet thing there. And they asked me if I would DJ it. And I said, yeah, but all the records I play, let me pull them out of your racks. And, so all the records in my set I just selected them there and then, and played it was quite a diverse set. I mean, it wasn't all dub and reggae. But that was fun.
How did you end up in Cuba?
Well, I've always wanted to go there, and I thought that I'd need to be going there in a work capacity, which later turned out to be incorrect. But while I was still...
It was for a while when
it was for a while, but then it changed. And actually, you're not supposed to work. So, but before I understood the current situation, I basically hustled a gig. I checked out the clubs there, and there's only a few. And the place I played was an amazing place. It's like an art gallery. It's actually several art galleries, different performance spaces, different little alcoves for DJs. There's multiple bars, huge place. And I just approached them via Instagram, and they were up for a gig. So that's how that came about. Then once it was booked, I had to, not to reveal that I was doing it until I got back.
Oh, just in terms of legality and citizenship.
Yeah. Fabrica de Arte is the venue. and I donated my fee to the poor kids in the street because there's a lot of those, and it just felt good to do that. Not that it would go very far, not that it was that much, but it was a gesture. And it was a very interesting experience, a place of real extremes. And the people were very friendly, and the soul of the place, is of course expressed through the music, which is spilling out of everywhere. I was there for 6 days, and it was a great experience. Yeah.
Did that music, did the Cuban music speak to you?
Oh yeah, I've always loved that. Absolutely. Yeah. It's such a melange of different types of music, so Afro and jazz, and of course, it's all filtered through that Latin sensibility, and the rhythms are just unbelievable. So yeah, definitely spoke to me. Yeah. Um, I don't. I'm pretty sure that I'm not that known there, or my bands aren't known there, and they're really, as the organizers explained after I'd done my set, because it was quite obvious that there was not that much. There wasn't much recognition as far as like the music I was playing. It wasn't. I wasn't getting a response like I do in the States or in Europe, where they know those tracks, they love them. They didn't know what those tracks were, like post punk, and the only ones they responded to were like the reggae ones. I did it through a few of those in it, but it was explained to me they're only into reggaeton, salsa in the clubs there, and that ain't me. I don't do that.
This album was recorded. I'm matching up the timeline, and it seems like it was recorded right around the time you moved into that house. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. It was, yeah. So it was a pandemic album. I did a couple of those. The other one was the other major one was the Night Crickets, which is with Victor De Lorenzo from Violent Femmes and a guy called Darwin, a trio, and we did a whole album just sharing files, because I was in LA and Darwin was in Santa Rosa and Victor was in Milwaukee, and we just sort of had this chain sharing files, and we recorded that album pretty quickly, and even started on the second one, which has just recently come out. We've never actually been in the studio together because that process works so well. I think some of the content of the first album certainly is very much drawing from the weird times that were happening then. There's quite a few so-called pandemic albums that they have a certain quality. I think of like Carnage, Nick Cave and Warren Ellis. That's one of my favorites. It's a different kind of like intensity.
In a major way, that kind of Zoom recording or that remote recording is really the antithesis of the live recording that we were talking about earlier, but they both suit you in different ways.
Yeah, although the way that we all worked was again very spontaneous. I made a point of not hearing the others' tracks until I was sitting down in the studio ready to record. And I didn't even listen to them before I recorded. So the first time I was hearing like the beat that Victor just laid down was when the tape was rolling and I had my bass in my hands and it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, we're recording. So that keeps that edge, and that was the case for most of the tracks. And it wasn't just bass I was playing keyboards and guitar and drone machines and all sorts of things. But the other two also had that same attitude when they were the recipients of what I'd done and what each had done. just to be very quick and spontaneous and not overthink things. So there was that element of that edge still. You can create it.
I thought it was you talking about the Night Crickets album when you were talking about this experience of effectively like writing lyrics on scraps of paper and not writing them until the time was actually there to record, obviously that's writing on the edge in a different way. And especially for lyrics, which are, I think probably for you are a lot more considered generally than that.
Well, I mean, they're considered when I'm writing them down. It's just that they were sort of fragments, But when I'm writing those fragments, I'm putting some consideration into what I'm writing. And it's just I had a collection of them, and I would just draw from that little pile in the moment. Like I'll hear the music, hear what we've done, hear what's sent to me, and then just select something that I feel like it has some kind of connection, and then immediately go in and do a vocal. And usually what you hear on the record is what I did, like one take.
Did that Burroughs cut up method, is that something that appealed to you?
Oh yeah, I was huge into that. Certainly, yeah. And there's an element of that with the Night Crickets for sure. And there's one track, A New Society, which is the title track of the first album. And how that came about was when we were trying to think of a band name. And I happened to have the list with me in the studio of all the band names, possible band names. It was like a list of 20 things. And I was listening to the playback of the track that was in process. And I looked at this list and I thought, oh, that kind of just reads randomly as a lyric. There's a story there. So I added a few little lines to connect the dots, as it were, and make it a story. And that's a kind of unconscious cut up.
Is it clear when you're starting down the journey of writing something, whether it's ultimately going to end up a poem or a song?
They're two really different things. Yeah.
The processes are different?
Yeah. It's a different muscle. And the poems are much more rare. I really gravitate towards writing lyrics. And you see that book, is, it spans a period starting in 1978. The earliest ones are from that time, and it goes up to, literally last week. But I added one after the thing had gone to press. I had an idea for a poem, and we actually managed to get it in there, called Aftermath. But the earlier ones are when I was 21. They're the more feverishly erotic ones.
I wonder why.
There's an element of eroticism in the later ones, but it's far more restrained. as before an elder.
I can't imagine going back and reading things I wrote when I was 21. I feel like that would kill me.
Yeah, I was a bit on the fence about including those pieces, but then I kept going back and thinking, no, there's something very vital to these pieces, and Chandra, who published the book, he was very encouraging, and he really liked them, so they stayed.
How did you end up writing about your mom?
That came about when she died, and it was just such a huge emotional moment, experience, that it just, that's the way I process things like that is through writing. And that was a big one. So it turned into quite an epic poem. I was up for nearly 3 days, stayed up writing the main body of that piece. And it was finished after I released her ashes back into nature, into the mother tree, as described in the poem. But it's just that was processing that experience.
When you're using music to process grief or tragedy or trauma, you end up writing about death a lot, which seems to be the case with you. It's a subject that you regularly come back to.
Yeah. Well, that going through that experience it's heavy and it's a big one, and it just naturally happens. I've written two songs about Pat Fish because that was a huge one for me. It was one of my dearest, oldest friends. I'm currently working on a whole album that's a tribute to another dear departed friend. That's nearly finished. I think maybe I might have finished that last night, actually.
Oh, you have to go back and check. I'm curious how you're not entirely sure whether you finished the album or not.
I do. Well, when you do these things, you need a bit of objective distance, So I just need a little bit of space, and then go back to it, and then decide, is that done or is it not? I feel like it's done. It's a collaborative effort with my friend Tim Newman, who's a Bristol-based English musician, brilliant guy, and Amory from the German band Faust. It's I think it's going to be quite a beautiful tribute to my friend Mike Finn, who was an extraordinary person.
A naked foot falls on the snow and ice. Cook, the local shaman, is taking me to see the mother tree. It is located deep in the forest, northern Massachusetts. It is midwinter and the trees are barren and black, in stark relief to the aching white sky. I follow in Cook's wake, amazed at his imperviousness to the cold. Through stripped thickets and bramble we trek. The air is still, silent. The crack of brittle twigs under our feet, the only sound.